Alien Professor Fornax gawked in utter disbelief as images of humans' violent ancient ancestors flashed on the view screen, pulled from the scriptures of Earth's old religions, directly contradicting Fornax's lifetime of research on primitive human pacifism. The elderly Rizian clicked his forked tongue rapidly, scales shimmering in agitation under the auditorium spotlights. His students, hundreds of fellow reptilian Rizians, squawked and chattered in shock. "That can't be right. Humans were pathetic weakling prey until we uplifted them." Fornax's gnarled claws jabbed accusingly at the lone human presenter, Dylan Mitchell. "Your kind never fought until we taught you civilization." Dylan locked eyes with the wizened reptile, not flinching. The 35-year-old xenoanthropologist had bitten his tongue throughout Fornax's insulting lecture on early hominids, seething as the most renowned alien expert on humans characterized Dylan's ancestors as feeble brutes. No longer. Dylan had accepted the University of Zeta Reticuli's invitation to foster interspecies scholarship. But 5 minutes into this farce, he knew appeasing Rizian egos would doom humanity. Fornax's research was shaping galactic policy on human integration. Dylan had to decimate the Rizians' delusions about uplifting humans, or his species would be forever caged as pets. So when Fornax derided human religions as charming superstitions of simple minds, Dylan acted. He strode to the podium, hijacked the AV system, and started broadcasting snippets of Earth's holy texts across the hall's view screens. Bloody etchings of Cain bashing Abel's skull, Huitzilopochtli devouring hearts atop an Aztec pyramid, Yahweh laying waste to Sodom, Allah's armies butchering infidels during the Crusades, Kayleigh's statue drenched in sacrificial gore. Damning images of pre-modern human brutality, ripped from sacred scriptures. Fornax and the Rizians gaped at the gory evidence of humanity's ancestral ferocity. Then the video cut to black, leaving just 5 words emblazoned on screen. "We were never your pets." With a tap on his wrist-mounted display, Dylan projected holographic images of ancient Sumerian cuneiform tablets above the auditorium. The clay slabs rotated slowly, their intricate wedge-shaped markings visible to all. These tablets, dating back over 5 millennia, contain the earliest known written records of human history, Dylan explained, his voice amplified through the hall. They speak of the Anunnaki, powerful beings from the heavens who came to Earth. The texts claim these Anunnaki genetically engineered primitive humans, granting us advanced knowledge and technology. Murmurs rippled through the Rizian crowd. Dylan swiped to a new set of images, ancient Sumerian carvings and sculptures depicting the Anunnaki. Audible gasps escaped the audience as they took in the uncannily reptilian features of the beings. With elongated snouts, slit-like eyes, and scaly hides, the resemblance to the Rizians was undeniable. The auditorium erupted into a frenzy of hisses and clicks as the implications sank in. Fornax slammed a clawed fist on his podium, his scales flashing in agitation. "Preposterous," he screeched. "Clearly these are nothing more than the fanciful imaginings of a primitive species. Baseless myths." Fornax's words did little to quell the uproar. Dylan waited patiently for the commotion to subside before continuing. "But the Sumerians were not alone in these accounts," he said, his voice cutting through the din. "Remarkably similar myths can be found in ancient cultures across Earth." New images flashed across the view screens. Artwork of the serpentine naga from Hindu temples, Mesoamerican codices showing the feathered snake deity Quetzalcoatl, Aboriginal Australian petroglyphs of the rainbow serpent. All bore striking similarities to the Rizian form. These tales span continents and millennia, from civilizations that had no contact with one another, Dylan argued. Such consistency suggests a seed of truth behind the legends, a shared ancient memory, perhaps, of humanity's true origins and its connection to a reptilian species suspiciously similar to Rizians. As the evidence mounted, Professor Fornax seemed to deflate. His posture sagged and his scales shifted to a sickly grey, as if the revelations were physically draining him. Yet he remained silent, unable or unwilling to muster a rebuttal in the face of the damning proof Dylan had presented. With another swipe, Dylan brought up a familiar passage from the book of Genesis on the view screen. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. He turned to face the auditorium. The Nephilim, a race of giants, born from the union of the sons of God and human women. But who were these sons of God? The apocryphal Book of Enoch elaborates further. Dylan pulled up the relevant text. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. He looked up at the Risians, his gaze intense. These angels, also known as the Watchers, descended from heaven to earth, took human wives and fathered the Nephilim. They taught humans forbidden knowledge, just like the Anunnaki in Sumerian myth. The parallels are striking. Dylan paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. Then he dropped the bombshell. But here's the kicker. The original Hebrew term for sons of God in Genesis. It's Bene Ha-Elohim, which literally translates to sons of the gods, plural. This suggests a pantheon, not the single God of modern Abrahamic faiths. The auditorium was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Dylan pressed on. The Watchers' actions, interbreeding with humans, sharing forbidden knowledge, align more closely with the polytheistic gods of ancient myth than the God of the Bible, gods like the Anunnaki. Fornax looked like he might keel over at any moment, his scales a sickly grey. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Dylan wasn't done. He pulled up a series of complex images on the screen, DNA sequencing data, annotated with highlighted segments. This is the most damning evidence of all, he said, his voice echoing in the silent hall. I've been conducting genetic analyses of human populations, and I've found something incredible. Segments of DNA that don't match any known human haplogroups. Segments that, when compared to samples from ancient remains, seem to have entered the human genome around the time these gods were said to have walked the earth. The implications hung heavy in the air. Dylan zoomed in on a particular DNA segment, the letters of the genetic code reflecting in his eyes. This, Dylan said, his voice ringing with conviction, is the smoking gun. These DNA sequences come from the remains of ancient humans, excavated at the very sites described in the Sumerian tablets and other myths worldwide. The majority of the genetic material is undeniably human, but there are unmistakable markers that don't correspond to any known human lineages. He paused, his eyes scanning the room, letting the gravity of his revelations sink in. In fact, he continued, these anomalous markers bear a remarkable similarity to Risian DNA. The implications are clear. This is evidence of genetic manipulation of early humans by the Anunnaki, the Watchers, who I believe to be the progenitors of the Risian species. The auditorium exploded into an uproar. Risian students leapt to their feet, shouting questions, hurling objections. Scales flashed in agitation, claws clicked against seats. The cacophony grew deafening. As the still murmuring students filed out of the auditorium, Fornax approached Dylan. His gait was stiff, his demeanor a warring mix of outrage and fascination. "Dr. Mitchell," he hissed, his forked tongue flicking out in agitation, "I demand an explanation. Where did you uncover this information? How can you be certain of its veracity?" Dylan met Fornax's gaze unflinchingly. "I've spent years on this research, Professor, conducted in secrecy, knowing full well the academic establishment would reject it out of hand." Fornax's eyes widened, his scales shimmering. "Years? But surely you must have records, documentation." "I do," Dylan nodded. "Extensive records, meticulously compiled. I'm prepared to share them with you for independent verification." The Risian scientist stared at Dylan for a long moment, emotions warring on his reptilian face. Suspicion, curiosity, anger, hunger. Finally, slowly, he nodded. "Very well, Dr. Mitchell. I will examine your evidence. But I warn you," he jabbed a clawed finger at Dylan's chest, "if this is some manner of deception—" Dylan held up a hand, his face solemn. "No deception, Professor, only truth. A truth that may shake the very foundations of your society's beliefs about my species. And your own." Fornax held Dylan's gaze a moment longer, then turned away with a swish of his tail. He stalked towards the exit, his clawed feet clicking on the polished floor. At the door, he paused, looking back over his shoulder. "We shall see, Dr. Mitchell. We shall see." With that, he disappeared into the corridor, leaving Dylan alone in the cavernous auditorium. The human scientist let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He knew this was just the beginning. The Rizians would not easily accept a truth that upended their entire worldview. But the journey of 1,000 miles began with a single step. And today, Dylan Mitchell had taken that first crucial step. The path ahead would be fraught with opposition, with disbelief, with anger. But he was ready. For the sake of his species, for the truth, he had to be. He squared his shoulders, gathered his materials, and strode towards the exit. The recess wouldn't last long. And when Fornax returned, Dylan would be ready to face the firestorm. For he carried the spark that could ignite a revolution of truth that would forever alter the destiny of two worlds, two peoples, inextricably linked by a shared past, a past that now held the key to their future. So as the students filed back into the auditorium, a palpable tension crackled in the air. Dylan stood at the podium, his posture straight, his eyes bright with the fervor of truth. He waited for the murmurs to subside before speaking. "In my research, I uncovered one final piece of evidence that ties our two species together in an undeniable way." With a tap on his wrist display, a series of images flickered to life on the view screens. Ancient Rizian texts, their serpentine script etched into stone tablets and metallic scrolls, artifacts bearing uncanny resemblances to those of ancient Earth. A collective gasp rippled through the auditorium. Dylan zoomed in on a particular tablet, its surface worn with age. These relics, dating back millennia, tell a story remarkably similar to those found in human mythologies. They speak of a group of Rizian explorers who journeyed to Earth in the distant past. There they genetically engineered primitive humans and shared with them the secrets of civilization. The text on the screen shifted, revealing depictions of reptilian beings standing amidst crude human figures. Dylan pointed to the images. "Look closely. These Rizian explorers didn't just visit Earth. They lived among humans, guiding their development before eventually returning to their homeworld." He swiped to the next artifact, a scroll with ominous glyphs. But the texts also mention a great cataclysm, a disaster that wiped out the majority of the Rizian presence on Earth, forcing the survivors to depart, leaving their human creations behind. Dylan turned to face the auditorium, his voice rising with conviction. "I believe this cataclysm is the same event described in human legends as the Great Flood, an event that nearly erased the memory of our shared history." The auditorium erupted. Rizian students leapt to their feet, hissing and clicking in agitation. Shouts of "blasphemy" and "lies" echoed off the walls. One particularly irate student jabbed a clawed finger at Dylan. "You dare insult our heritage with these fabrications? You claim we are no better than your primitive kind?" Dylan stood his ground, meeting the accusing glares with calm resolve. "I make no claims of superiority or inferiority, only of a shared truth that has been lost to time." Amidst the chaos, Professor Fornax rose from his seat. He approached the stage, his gait slow and measured. The room fell silent as he ascended the steps, coming to stand beside Dylan. Fornax reached out, his gnarled claws hovering over the ancient Rizian relics. His eyes, usually sharp with disdain, now glimmered with a curious light. He turned to Dylan, locking eyes with the human researcher. "You have presented a compelling case, one that demands further investigation." Fornax faced the auditorium, his posture straightening. I will be forming a special committee to delve deeper into Dr. Mitchell's findings. We will examine these relics, cross-reference them with our own historical records." With that, Fornax turned and strode off the stage, his tail swishing thoughtfully behind him. Dylan watched him go, a mix of relief and trepidation churning in his gut. He had lit the spark. Now he could only hope it would illuminate the truth rather than ignite a firestorm of denial and backlash. But one thing was certain. The path forward would be fraught with challenges, both academic and personal. As the auditorium buzzed with heated discussions, Dylan gathered his materials, steeling himself for the battles to come. He had started this journey. Now he had to see it through. In the wake of Dylan's groundbreaking lecture, the University of Zeta Reticuli became a battleground of conflicting ideologies. Rizian news networks buzzed with heated debates, some praising Dylan's courage in challenging the status quo, while others condemned him as a dangerous radical peddling falsehoods. Dylan's inbox overflowed with messages from both supporters and detractors. But amidst the outpouring of encouragement and criticism, a darker undercurrent emerged. Radical Rizian traditionalists, enraged by what they perceived as an assault on their sacred history, flooded Dylan's accounts with vicious threats. "Heretic," they hissed in anonymous messages. "You dare defile the memory of our ancestors with your lies? You will pay for this blasphemy with your life." Dylan's jaw clenched as he read the venomous words, but he refused to be cowed. He had come too far, uncovered too much to back down now. With renewed determination, he threw himself into his research, working tirelessly alongside Professor Fornax and the newly formed investigative committee. Deep within the archives of the university, they pored over ancient Rizian texts and artifacts, seeking any shred of evidence to support Dylan's claims. And as they dug deeper, the pieces began to fall into place. "Look at this," Fornax said, his claws trembling as he held up a battered metallic object. "This device, man, it's unlike anything in our recorded history. The materials, the design, it's centuries ahead of its time." Dylan examined the artifact, his eyes widening in recognition. "I've seen something similar in the ruins of ancient Sumerian cities on Earth, but this is even more advanced." As they continued their search, more anomalies emerged, fragments of technology that predated known Rizian inventions by millennia, cryptic references to a great journey, and a world of blue and green. Each discovery added weight to Dylan's theory, chipping away at the long-held beliefs of Rizian society. But the true breakthrough came when they stumbled upon a hidden chamber within the very foundations of the university itself. As they descended into the musty depths, their lights fell upon a series of frescoes that took their breath away. Intricate images of Rizian explorers, their reptilian forms unmistakable, depicted in vivid detail. They stood alongside primitive humans, guiding them, teaching them, sharing their knowledge. The scenes unfolded like a storyboard, chronicling the Rizians' journey to Earth and their interactions with early human civilization. But it was the final fresco that stopped them in their tracks. A massive spacecraft, its hull gleaming in the painted starlight, hovered above the Earth. And below, a small group of Rizians, left behind as the ship departed, their forms bearing an uncanny resemblance to the Anunnaki and watchers of human myth. "This is it," Dylan whispered, his voice echoing in the chamber. "The missing link, the proof we've been searching for." As they moved closer to examine the inscriptions surrounding the frescoes, a sudden flash of light filled the room. A holographic figure materialized before them, its form flickering and distorted with age. The figure spoke, its voice a ghostly whisper in a language long forgotten. But as Dylan and Fornax listened, their eyes grew wide with understanding. For the message contained a warning, and a revelation that would shake the very foundations of both their worlds. The holographic Rizian flickered, its scaly visage contorted with anguish as it spoke. "Our world was dying," it rasped, the alien tongue translated by some unseen technology. "A catastrophic collapse of our ecosystem. Our only hope was to find a new home." Dylan and Fornax watched transfixed as the recording continued. We discovered Earth, a primitive planet teeming with potential, and the humans so easily manipulated. We saw an opportunity to create a workforce to rebuild our civilization. The Rizian's image shimmered, its form seeming to waver between physical and digital. But some of us grew fond of our creations. We couldn't bear to see them enslaved, so we sabotaged the mission, stayed behind to protect them. The hologram's eyes, twin pools of obsidian, locked onto Dylan's. But the others will return. They will come for what they believe is theirs by right. You must be ready. With a final flicker, the hologram dissipated, leaving Dylan and Fornax in stunned silence. The implications crashed over them like a tidal wave. The Rizians who stayed. They were the true progenitors of humanity. Not gods or angels, but flesh and blood aliens who sacrificed everything to defend their adopted children. Fornax sagged against the chamber wall, his scales ashen. "This changes everything," he whispered. "Our entire history and a lie." Dylan nodded, his mind reeling. The Anunnaki, the Watchers, the Nephilim, all pieces of a cosmic puzzle finally falling into place. But the revelation brought with it a chilling realization. If the Rizian leader's warning was true, then humanity faced an existential threat beyond imagining. As if on cue, Dylan's wrist display chirped an urgent alert, a message from his contact at the university, a single line of text that made his blood run cold. Dylan's head snapped up, his eyes locking with Fornax's. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. They were no longer researcher and subject, human and alien. They were allies, bound by a shared truth and a common enemy. Fornax straightened, his claws flexing. "We need to go, now." Dylan nodded, already moving towards the chamber's exit. The weight of the future pressed down on him, a burden he never asked for but could not refuse. For in the depths of that ancient chamber, Dylan Mitchell had uncovered not just the truth of humanity's past, but the key to its survival, and he would fight to his last breath to ensure that the sacrifices of those ancient Rizians were not in vain. Dylan's mind raced as he hurried through the darkened corridors of the university, his footsteps echoing off the polished stone. His wrist display flashed with an incoming message. It was from Fornax. "Dr. Mitchell, you must leave immediately." The Rizian's voice hissed through the speaker, his tone urgent. "The authorities are on their way to arrest you. They plan to seize all your research." Dylan's heart pounded in his chest. "But where will I go if they find me?" "I have arranged for a spacecraft to take you to a safe location," Fornax interrupted. "A remote, uninhabited planet where you can hide until the situation calms down." Dylan hesitated for a moment, torn between his desire to stand his ground and the realization that he was outnumbered and outmatched. With a heavy sigh, he nodded. "All right. Send me the coordinates." "Dr. Mitchell, I'm a descendant of the Rizians who remained on Earth. Your world is in grave danger. The Rizians are coming to reclaim what they believe is theirs by right. You must return to Earth immediately. Here are the coordinates you will need." Dylan's mind reeled as he climbed into the sleek silver spacecraft. He inputted the coordinates from the anonymous message, his fingers trembling. As the engines hummed to life, he caught a glimpse of Rizian security forces flooding into the hangar, their weapons drawn. But it was too late. The spacecraft lifted off, slicing through the atmosphere and into the star-studded void of space. Dylan leaned back in his seat, his heart racing. He had narrowly escaped capture, but he knew his journey was far from over. As the spacecraft hurtled through the cosmos, Dylan explored its advanced systems. The onboard AI was a treasure trove of Rizian knowledge, its databases filled with centuries of history and technology. But as he delved deeper, a chilling revelation emerged. The Rizians who had returned to their homeworld had never truly abandoned Earth. They had been watching, waiting, biding their time until humanity was ripe for conquest. And now, with Dylan's research threatening to expose their plans, they had decided to accelerate their timetable. Dylan's hands clenched into fists. He had unwittingly set in motion a chain of events that could spell doom for his species, but he would not let that happen. He would reach Earth, warn his people, and find a way to stop the Rizian invasion. Even if it meant sacrificing everything he held dear. As Dylan's spacecraft touched down at the coordinates on Earth, he found himself in a desolate, rocky landscape. The sun beat down mercilessly as he disembarked, the heat shimmering off the barren ground. Suddenly a section of the rocky terrain shifted, revealing a hidden entrance. Dylan approached cautiously, his hand hovering over the weapon at his side. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and muscular, with scales glinting in the sunlight. "Dr. Mitchell, I presume," the Rizian said, his voice deep and resonant. "I am Zoran, leader of the Resistance. We've been expecting you." Dylan followed Zoran into the underground facility, marveling at the advanced technology lining the walls. Holographic displays flickered with real-time data, while sleek weapons and armor sat ready for use. "We are the descendants of those who stayed behind," Zoran explained as they walked. "For generations we have been preparing for the return of our misguided brethren. This facility contains the means to defend Earth, but we lack the key to activate it." He led Dylan to a central chamber, where a group of Rizians and humans gathered around a large translucent table. Ancient texts and artifacts littered its surface. "The key of Anunnaki," Zoran said, gesturing to a holographic image floating above the table. It depicted an intricate crystalline object, pulsing with energy. "Hidden by our ancestors to prevent its misuse. Without it, our defenses are useless." Dylan studied the texts, his mind racing. These manuscripts, they contain clues to the key's location. Göbekli Tepe, Dwarka, Machu Picchu. The ancient Rizians left a trail for us to follow. Zoran nodded grimly. "A trail fraught with danger. Our enemies have agents everywhere seeking the same prize. We must act swiftly and covertly." As the group pored over the clues, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Holographic displays flashed red, warning of an imminent breach. "They found us," Zoran growled, snatching up a pulse rifle. "We need to move now." Dylan grabbed a weapon of his own, his heart pounding. The quest for the key of Anunnaki had begun, a desperate race against time and foes both ancient and new. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, as Dylan and Zoran prepared to embark on their globe-spanning mission. The ruins of Göbekli Tepe awaited, the first stop on a journey that would test their resolve and ingenuity at every turn. Pulsefire erupted in the corridors beyond, the sounds of battle drawing nearer. Dylan checked his weapon, adrenaline surging through his veins. Beside him, Zoran's scales rippled with anticipation. "Stay close and stay sharp," the Rizian leader warned as they moved towards the fray. "Our enemies will stop at nothing to claim the key for themselves." Together they plunged into the chaos, the fate of two worlds resting on their shoulders. The ancient secrets of Göbekli Tepe beckoned, promising answers and peril in equal measure. Dylan's mind raced as they fought their way out of the facility, the weight of his discoveries heavy upon him. The Anunnaki, the Watchers, the Nephilim, all pieces of a puzzle spanning millennia. And at its heart, the key of Anunnaki, a relic of immense power and unknown potential. In the wrong hands, it could spell doom for Earth and all who called it home. But in the right hands, in Dylan and Zoran's hands, it could be the salvation of everything they held dear. As they emerged into the harsh sunlight once more, Dylan squinted against the glare, his resolve hardening. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever secrets the ancient sites held, he would face them head-on. For the truth, for Earth, for the future of human and Rizian alike, he would not fail. The quest had begun, and he would see it through to the end, no matter the cost. Pulsefire scorched the ancient stones, as Dylan and Zoran sprinted through the ruins of Machu Picchu, dodging blasts from the pursuing Rizian soldiers. The key of Anunnaki, an ornate crystalline artifact, was clutched tightly in Dylan's hand, its surface thrumming with an otherworldly energy. Suddenly, a figure emerged from behind a crumbling wall, flanked by a contingent of heavily armed Rizians. Dylan's eyes widened in shock as he recognized the newcomer, Professor Fornax, his scales glinting in the sun. "Dr. Mitchell," Fornax sneered, his voice dripping with disdain, "did you really think you could uncover the truth without consequences?" Dylan's grip tightened on the key. "Fornax, you're one of them, a sleeper agent?" The Rissian scientist chuckled darkly. "Indeed, my mission was to monitor your research, to ensure that the true history of our species' involvement with yours never came to light." Zoran stepped forward, his muscles tensed for battle. "You will not stop us, traitor. The key is ours, and with it we will defend Earth from your kind's aggression." "Foolish primitive," Fornax hissed. "You have no idea of the power you meddle with. The key is Rissian property, and it will be returned to us, along with your planet." With a flick of his clawed hand, Fornax signaled his soldiers to attack. Pulse blasts filled the air as Dylan and Zoran dove for cover, returning fire with their own weapons. The battle raged across the ancient Incan site, Rissian soldiers closing in from all sides. Dylan and Zoran fought side by side, their movements synchronized by the urgency of their mission. But the Rissians were relentless. One by one, the human and Rissian defenders fell, until only Dylan and Zoran remained standing. As they made their final push towards the exit, a searing bolt of energy lanced towards Dylan. Time seemed to slow as Zoran leaped into its path, taking the full force of the blast in his chest. The Rissian warrior crumpled to the ground, his life force ebbing away. Dylan skidded to his knees beside him, cradling Zoran's head in his lap. "Zoran, no!" Dylan choked out, tears stinging his eyes. "Why did you do that?" Zoran coughed, a trickle of blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. "Because you are the one who must succeed. You must take the key, activate the defenses." With a trembling hand, Zoran pressed the key into Dylan's palm, his claws curling around the human's fingers. "Protect our people, Dr. Mitchell. Both Rissian and human. It is your destiny." With a final shuddering breath, Zoran's eyes glazed over, his body going limp in Dylan's arms. Anguish and determination warred within Dylan as he rose to his feet, the key clutched to his chest. He could hear Fornax's soldiers closing in, their footsteps echoing off the ancient stones. With a final glance at Zoran's fallen form, Dylan turned and ran, the key guiding him towards the hidden facility and the last hope for Earth's salvation. Miles above, Rissian warships descended through the atmosphere, their hulls glinting in the sunlight. Dread filled Dylan's heart as he realized the true scope of the invasion. Cities burned, people screamed, and the Rissian fleet hung in the sky like a sword poised to strike at the heart of humanity. Dylan's lungs burned as he raced through the jungle, the hidden facility coming into view. He could hear the whine of Rissian pulse weapons behind him, the sound spurring him onward. He burst into the facility, the key of Anunnaki glowing in his hand. The central control system loomed before him, an intricate array of ancient Rissian technology fused with human innovation. With trembling hands, Dylan inserted the key into the designated slot. The console hummed to life, holographic displays flickering and pulsing with energy. A computerized voice echoed through the chamber. Planetary defense system activated. Initializing in 3, 2, 1. Dylan watched in awe as a massive energy field erupted from the facility, expanding outward to envelop the entire planet. The Rissian ships in the sky shuddered and convulsed as the field washed over them, their systems overloading and shutting down. One by one, the alien craft plummeted to the ground, crashing into the war-torn landscape like meteors from a vengeful god. The Rissian invasion had been thwarted, but the cost had been immense. Dylan emerged from the facility, his heart heavy with the weight of the lives lost and the revelation of humanity's true origins. The world lay in ruins around him, cities reduced to smoldering rubble and once green fields now blackened with ash. Survivors began to emerge from the wreckage, their faces streaked with dirt and blood. They looked to Dylan, their eyes filled with a mix of fear, confusion, and desperate hope. In that moment, Dylan knew that his journey had only just begun. The truth about the Rizians and their role in human history could no longer be hidden. Humanity would have to confront this new reality, to rebuild from the ashes of the invasion and forge a new path forward. As the sun began to set over the devastated landscape, Dylan stood atop the ruins of the facility, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He thought of Zoran's sacrifice, of the countless lives lost in the battle for Earth's freedom. "I will not let your deaths be in vain," he whispered, his voice carried away by the wind. "I will ensure that humanity rises from this, stronger and wiser than before. We will never again be pawns in the games of those who would seek to control us." The key of Anunnaki glinted in his hand, a reminder of the power and responsibility he now bore. Dylan knew that the road ahead would be long and treacherous, but he would not falter. For he was the guardian of humanity's future, the keeper of the truth that would shape the course of history, and he would not rest until that future was secured, no matter the cost. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.